Hey everybody, it's Dr. Allison, and this week we're going to discuss what it means to execute strategy. So, at this point in the course, we've discussed all kinds of things about how to think strategically, to what it means to set business visions, to understanding your core capabilities and competitive analysis, doing all those things to get to the planning phase. And last week we talked about what it means to plan a strategy and all the things you have to consider when building your strategic plan. Now is the piece where this lecture will really help you during your third group project is the fundamentals of understanding how to execute your plan. So planning is one thing, but how you actually go and implement and execute your strategy is really the most important element of strategic management. The execution phase is where you're actually going to put it into play and really make or break the strategic plan. So without further ado, let's get into this lecture. Strategic execution. So some studies out there have shown that executives have showcased they feel that over 60% of strategies are not properly executed. So again, strategies come from all types of business individuals. Strategies can be big or small, but not all of them get executed properly. Not all big ideas or plans are flawlessly executed. And according to certain surveys, over half of them are not executed properly. Now think about that. If over 60% of strategies are not executed properly, think how much resources, financial capital, and time and investment is wasted in certain companies if their strategies are not executed properly. That's a big deal. That's a waste of time and resources that could have been focused on something else. Execution is a discipline and an integral part of strategy. As I explained just a moment ago, that execution is the make or break. It's going to be the part that defines success or failure for a strategic plan. And it's a discipline. It's something that a company or business individuals need to equip themselves with and how to do it. It's a core capability you need to learn how to do. It's a discipline that all companies need to understand what they're good at and how they can execute their strategic plan. No strategy is worthwhile without the ability of a company to execute it. So again, if you can't execute your strategy, you really need to spend time during that planning phase to understand, can I execute the strategy or not? Execution of strategy is one of the top responsibilities of any business leader. So while everybody has a piece of responsibility when it comes to executing a business plan or strategy, it is the business leader, the project manager, the executive, whomever is overseeing the entire project plan and strategic plan. That's the one at the end of the day that's held accountable. The strategic business leader is the one to not only set the vision, sign off on the plan, and approve it. They're also the one to monitor it to make sure it's being executed and implemented correctly and accurately. Business leaders are the ones who comprehensively understand the dynamics of the business, the people, processes, and resources needed to execute a strategy. So again, the reason why the business leader is responsible is because they're the ones who can look at it holistically, look at the big picture, look at all the different moving parts that put the strategy together, and understand, what type of people, what type of resources, what processes, what technology, what are all the things that are needed to execute the strategy correctly, and that's what the business leader is there to do. Execution must be at the core of the company's culture. If your company is just known for great ideas but never executing on those great ideas, then that's not true strategy. A company must have adopted into their company culture that they are executioners, they can complete projects, and they truly can bring things to fruition when it comes to a strategic plan. Strategic execution isn't defined as just getting the job done. It articulates the how and when the job will be done. So a task is getting the job done. A general process or something that you just do on a regular basis just to keep the business moving day to day is getting the job done. That strategic execution is that articulation, your ability to communicate how the strategy is being executed and when it will be executed, and also the measurement of performance we talked about last week. How are you measuring your success? The last bullet point, strategy can fail if a business leader and team don't understand how to approach the strategy. So they must set clear goals, guidance, and processes to mitigate this. So at the very beginning of a strategy execution, you need to make sure that all key players and individuals involved in executing that strategy understand the entire plan from beginning to end. That there's clear guidance and instructions on what each of their individual parts are supposed to do. Because if one part of the execution plan is broken, or if there's one or two, key players that don't understand clearly what they're supposed to do, that's going to break your entire strategic plan. It's the domino effect. If one domino can't align with the others and go down with the rest of them, then that's going to be the domino effect. If one key part doesn't work, the rest of it's going to have a potential for failure. So when we talk about how to align your teams and making sure they all have a clear understanding of what their key part is, there are challenges though to strategic execution. Insufficient partner buy-in. Quite frankly, if your business partners, if your stakeholders, if there's any one key member of your business or or part of the strategy that doesn't buy into your strategy and doesn't agree to the whole plan, then there's going to be a definite challenge. You're going to have barriers, you're going to have roadblocks, you're going to have pushback, you're going to have people be in your way from seeing it to fruition. So that's why it's very important from the earlier steps into planning your strategy to get the buy-in, to get the approvals that you need to execute your plan. Insufficient leadership attention. Too often, firm leaders view the strategy development process as linear or finite initiative after undergoing a resource intensive strategic planning process. So, what this means is that the leaders who are hands off, the leaders who don't really care about the ins and outs of a strategic plan, and they just want the job to get done and not understand the overall strategic plan and what all the things that are involved. Those are going to be the leaders that won't have an ability to speak up later when their teams don't perform properly. The leaders who are really involved, the leaders who understands the ins and outs of a strategic plan, the hows, the whys, the whats, and all the different elements in between. That's what's going to help any strategic plan come to fruition and be successful. Is when a leader is involved and they're paying attention to all the areas of the strategic plan. Then there's ineffective leadership. Those who can't understand the difference between being involved but not being too involved. Let your teams execute. You need to have trust in your teams, just in general, not even in strategic planning. Just day to day. You need to have trust in your teams. Have oversight. Give them guidance. Get progress reports. Understand how they're performing, but don't get so involved in being a micromanager that it hinders them from getting their job done and also causes delays in getting the project done. Or also ineffective leadership in you just don't know what the heck's going on. There's some leaders who just pretend they can walk the walk and or they can talk the talk but not walk the walk. You got to be able to be a strategic, effective leader to guide your teams in the right direction and be there if there's a roadblock. And there's leaders out there who are ineffective who can really cause a strategy to not come to fruition. Then there's weak or inappropriate strategy. So during the course of strategic planning, the lack of a realistic or honest assessment of the firm will lead to the development of a weak or inappropriate strategy. So again, it's all about that planning phase. No strategy should be executed at this point in strategy planning if the plan is not legit, if the plan is not fully scoped out, and all those variables that we talked about, the trade-offs, the capabilities analysis, the competitive analysis, if all those things we talked about in strategic planning don't occur and aren't truly vetted out, then it's going to be very difficult for the strategy to be strong and effective. And lastly, resistance to change. We talked about this before. Change management is very important during any kind of strategic execution phase. You want to, again, make sure that everybody understands their part, the reasons why they're transforming their responsibilities in the direction we're going as a business unit. You need to be able to have that management style to articulate why we're changing the direction we're going in this strategy plan and what the benefits are to both the employee, the company, but also the customers. You have to be able to articulate not just why, but what are the benefits and value. And that's going to be easier for employees who have a resistance to change to adapt and be flexible. So more tips for change management. How to have your team buy into the strategy. So Depending on your company and if your employees are involved or not in the strategic planning phase, again, it's that top down or bottoms up directive. If they're in that bottoms up kind of planning phase, a lot of your teammates and members of your team are going to be involved already and already understand the overall strategic plan. Now, for those who are on a top down kind of management style or company style, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get everybody's buy in, but there are ways you can actually mitigate that and still have effective change management. One is start at the top. Make sure from the top down there's a clear directive from the leaders and there's a clear vision set. Ask for feedback even before you begin. So before you even begin the strategic execution and implement your strategy, make sure that you have sit down sessions, you have meetings to clearly articulate the strategic plan, and ask for feedback from the team members, especially for team members who may not have been involved in the planning phase. Make sure that they fully understand what their responsibilities are and what the overall intent of the plan is. And then ask for their feedback and try to answer their questions and clarify any concerns as early on as possible. It is very important for a leader to define what exactly the change is. So there should be no vagueness. It should be very clear, concise, to the point, what the change is and why it's occurring. And then simplify, simplify, simplify. It's key to keep it concise and not be too complex and confusing and why you're trying to state what the change is and what the plan is all about. The more clear and concise you are, the better the reception and understanding that's going to be for employees. And then also articulate why the change shouldn't just be about bottom line numbers. Of course, a lot of what we're doing in a strategy plan for companies is to impact the bottom line. I mean, at the end of the day, profit and bottom line numbers is what really drives the health of a corporation. But there are times, though, you're also making changes into a strategic plan to change the culture of a company, to change the reception of the company with the customers. You're changing the way you're doing business for the longer good. So articulate, to your employees who have issues with a strategic plan that it's more than just, profitability. It's those things I just mentioned. It's ways to enhance the culture of the company. It's ways to embrace change into the market to be competitive. Things like that will make employees who have a resistance to change hopefully adopt what you're doing a little bit better. One big thing that companies can do too is implement formal recognition programs. It's very important to have recognition programs for your employees. Reward a good job. Praise your employees, give them recognition programs or some type of incentive programs to operate to their fullest extent and to just recognize a good job. That goes a long way for certain employees. Not everybody has the ability to be, patted on the back every day, but every now and then it's good to reward your employees for a job well done. Maybe at the end of a strategy plan and it's executed, just a team building exercise or some type of small bonus, something to give your employees that recognition and that gives them that sense of, pride in their work and helps them be more adaptable to change in the future. And the very last thing that's listed here, but the number one thing I can think of that's most important is never stop communicating. Communication, as we discuss in any business course, is key, and keeping your teams up to date about how the strategy is being executed, its performance, transparency, as much as you can share with clear information, the better it's going to be for everyone to adopt the change in a strategic plan. Okay, so now there are 10 key steps for strategic execution. So think about this, that your plan is set, you've gotten the approval to execute your strategy. Now here's where you get to the part where you've made your game plan and now you're about to go into the field and play the game. Step 1, visualize the strategy. You have your plan set, you have an idea of what you're going to do. Now take a step back and visualize it. Before you even execute something, kind of do that theater of mind, that rehearsal in your head. This is how it's going to go down. This is what all that planning work we put into effect. How's it going to play out? The number 2, measure the strategy. As you start executing your strategy, have a clear idea of what your KPIs are. We talked about it before, the importance of measuring the strategy. How do you know you're successful? What are the KPIs, key performance indicators, And at what timelines are you going to check in to measure your success? What are your milestones? What are you looking to achieve in steps A, B, and C to complete your strategy? Report the progress. Make sure you're looking at that measurement on a regular basis and report it out. Like I said, transparency to all levels of the business to make sure they understand how the entire company and group is doing. Make decisions. So you have to make decisions on the fly. Not everything you have set in a plan will come to fruition, so you have to pivot your direction a little bit here and there depending on what variables may come up or obstacles that come in the way. So be ready to make decisions as you execute your strategy. Identify strategy projects. So, a strategy can consist of multiple projects into one strategy. So there may be, like I said, those milestones. What are those small term goals that you can achieve to hit that longer term vision? Strategies are longer term in nature, right? They're sustainable business goals that last for a longer period of time. So what are those strategic projects or milestones, if you want to consider it that way, you need to achieve along the way? And then align on those. Step 6, make sure that everybody understands what those are. Then you have to manage those projects or those milestones. You have to understand what is it going to take to get chunks of the strategy executed at a time. As you look at the right there, it's kind of a building block, right? You can only build your building one phase at a time. Think of a strategy as building a skyscraper, where you can only start at the bottom and work your way up. You can only do the framework or the aesthetics of the building at any given point in time. So you have to understand what those kind of stepping stones are to get to your full strategy. Communicate. We talked about that. It's very important. Align individual roles. Make sure everybody has a clear understanding of what their expectations are for their position. And again, we talked about at the end of it or along the way, reward performance. That's only going to help your employees buy into your strategies and be a part of what you're trying to achieve. So in the article, there are core processes of strategic execution that you need to take into account. The first core process is strategy planning. Now, we talked a lot about this already in the class, but to go over it in summary, the part of this process is defining where the business wants to go. So again, what does your business need? What is the customer value proposition? What is the best way to grow the business profitability? What is the current competitive landscape? And then after you define all those things and what kind of strategy you're working towards, can your business execute the strategy is part of the planning phase. Like we talked about, what are the important milestones of hitting that strategic plan, like we just discussed in the last slide? Is the plan scattered or sharply focused? Very important. You want to make sure it's a very laser focused plan that's very easy to understand and clear to execute. And are the linkage between people and processes clear? So again, in your planning phase, are the processes aligned with how your people and their knowledge and expertise can to execute it? And do you have all the resources in place to execute all the processes towards your plan? The second core process of execution is called people process. People process defines who's going to take the business where it needs to go. It's a robust process of identifying the key needs of the business and what type of talent it needs to execute the strategy. You need to make sure you have the right people in the right jobs. You need to make sure that the right people in the right jobs have the technology or the resources needed to execute their jobs effectively. So the first pillar of this is linking strategic plan to results. There's an overall strategic plan and overall strategic goal, right? There's results that everybody participating in the strategic plan needs to adopt, understand that's their overall results they're looking for. But then there are individual goals for each individual employee and what they do that need to be defined into how that they're part of their responsibilities of the strategic plan need to be evaluated. It's all about evaluating performance and what are their personal goals they need to link towards that overall company strategy. Then the next pillar is development of leadership pipeline. So that leadership is crucial, like we talked about. The leaders are the ones that need to really, foster continuous improvement. They're the ones that need to understand where the roadblocks are and how to find ways to work through those barriers and pivot the direction to ensure improvement to the employees and the company, to ensure the strategies being executed correctly. Succession depth and risk minimization. So you need to invest in your people. You need to understand who your key players are, who are those that are going to really shine. Identify your ones that are really going to be the ones that you want to succeed and perhaps promote one day so they can take the next level of the business plan to fruition. But also identify where you can help those employees who are struggling. Everybody deserves a fair chance in their job, and it's finding ways to not only recognize your top performers, but also help those who aren't performing as well, and give them the opportunity to improve, and give them resources and coaching and guidance to help them succeed. Because as long as each employee does the best that they can and the best you can as a leader to help them succeed, the better off the strategy is going to be executed, and the better off the company is going to be long term. But the third pillar is non-performers decision making. Now, you can give so many employees a chance to perform, but some people just aren't meant to be in the position they're in. Unfortunately, bad hires do occur. The wrong people are in the wrong position, or those who don't adopt the change and those who aren't, working through the change management just really need to be identified. And you need to make that decision of, whether or not to keep them long term in your company or assign them to a different role, because you don't want to have anybody being a barrier or obstacle to executing your strategic plan. The third core process of strategic execution is the operation process. This is all about getting the job done. But again, strategy isn't about getting the job done, but this is the core element of what it's going to take and how you're going to do it. The operation process provides the path for people to execute. A robust operation process links people on how they will conduct their responsibilities and functions to execute the vision of the strategy. The operational plan articulates the how, as I just mentioned, of the strategy execution, and also describes the expected outcomes of the execution based on the plan. The operation process also aligns what projects and work streams will be conducted. It aligns how the projects will be managed and assessed. It aligns how the milestone achievements will be captured. It aligns how the performance measurement of the strategy is being conducted. And it also aligns how leadership will evaluate results and make decisions through the execution of a strategy. Basically gives you the entire roadmap, what each key player and each individual department is responsible for, how they're being measured for success, and how they're going to be evaluated into making sure that they're operating to their fullest capability to execute a strategy. So now that you've established your operational plan and how you're going to execute your strategy, there are individual things that each employee needs to understand when it comes to communication and decision making. First, decision rights. Every team needs to understand who makes what decision at what point. I've worked on many projects where there's been a misunderstanding of who makes the final decision on certain parts of a project, or you're not sure who makes the final decision, or you think the final decision should come from one or two different people. It's a leader's responsibility to assign the decision makers, but also make sure that the decision makers are individuals that can make a decision but not second guess it, who are strong in their ability to make a decision to move forward and not have to worry about second guessing themselves. So it's very important for all team members to understand who to go to make what decision at any given point in the execution of a strategy. Number two, information flow. It's making sure that all important competitive information makes it to headquarters quickly. This allows for quick top management decision making to react or proactively work towards strategy to compete in the competitive market. Think about this as back at headquarters, there's your executives, but in the field are the employees, the ones out there in the market. Think about sales for that matter. The sales agents or sales managers are out there talking to vendors on a regular basis, or are out there talking to their customers on a regular basis, but they're getting feedback on what's going on in the competition in the market. That's great, valuable information that field employee in the field needs to take back to headquarters and present to their top managers, their top executives, so that way those executives can make strategic plans to pivot their direction to make sure they're being competitive with the market. Think as an example, let's say there's a Nike sales manager who goes out to Dick's Sporting Goods and Academy Sports and Outdoors, and they're a sales manager for both retail outlets, and they're working on their next seasonal assortment with those retailers. But the retailers are telling them, you know what? There's a whole new product line from Adidas coming out, and it's going to be focused on a certain type of product. Well, that's important for Nike to know what's going on in the competition. Nike can take whatever information they were given back to headquarters and tell the Nike, top executives of what their key competitor Adidas is doing and find ways to be competitive with that information. It also helps field line and lower level employees understand how their day-to-day functions contribute to the overall bottom line and strategic vision. So it also gives that sense of ownership for their field employees to feel that they're a part of the strategy, that their information is very valuable, and it gives that top down, but also really that bottoms up planning that we talked about before. That wraps up our overview of strategic execution. And so now at this point in the semester, you've been given several lectures and several reading assignments on various elements of strategy, from what it means to think strategically, to being a business visionary, to identifying core capabilities and your competitive advantage in a market, and then also how to plan for a strategy and how to execute a strategy. So we're at the halfway mark of the semester at this point. What I'd like to do now is give you a midterm prep. There are going to be 5 key, I'd say, topics that we covered in the course so far that I want to make sure you understand and study again or review to be ready for the midterm. However, in the midterm, though, only 4 of these 5 will be given to you in a prompt for a short essay, 3 to 4 paragraphs approximately, on either a fictitious or real-world case study example. So out of these 5, you'll have 4 that are presented to you in the midterm, but only 3 you'll have to write about. So when you get your midterm on the 8th, and again, on the 8th of October, we will be in class, we will be in person, so be ready. I will have the midterm for you. It will not be typed, it will be handwritten, but you can bring your book, your lectures, your PowerPoints, your laptop, any supportive material you need to help you write your essays. Again, though, I would be prepared. You're not going to have enough time to relearn it all in the classroom. You will be using most of your time to write your essays. So we will start promptly at 6:30, and everybody has until 9:10 to complete their midterm. So the first midterm topic, of course, is the 5 forces. Really honed in on this. Just make sure you understand all 5 at a high level, what they mean, how they shape, competitive analysis, and just really get familiar with each 5 of these. And the essay question, if it is presented, will ask you to pick one of the 5 and be able to apply it to a real-world situation or a fictitious example that will be presented to you. The next topic that we will potentially have on the midterm is building a vision and really understanding the difference between core ideology and BHAGs. Remember, BHAGs are big, hairy, audacious goals. And in big, hairy, audacious goals, there are 5 different types. I really want you to understand what those 5 different types are. Understand the difference between target-oriented, competitive, role model, internal transformation, and what it means to have a BHAG be creative and not discovered. So core ideology will be a context of that you start with your core ideology, you understand your core values, purpose, and it's discovered, but then you augment that into a bigger long-term goal, and that's what a BHAG is. So understand the difference between those 2, but really understand the difference between the 5 types of BHAGs, and a question will be tailored toward understanding the difference between the 2, but really on one type of BHAG versus the other. Another potential topic that will come up is reinventing the business model. There are 5 reasons to consider why you reinvent your business model, and I really want you to understand what those are. Understand what it means to have a successful business model as well. You could be presented with a topic of a consideration for a company or business to reinvent their business model. You're going to have to understand why they need to, but also some type of strategy to reinvent their business model based on the outline below and the things we talked about in the class. The next topic that may come up on your midterm is strategy planning and the 7 rules of strategy planning, and also the strategy to performance loop. So be very familiar with these and what each of the steps mean in detail. For the 7 rules of strategy planning, remember it's all about keeping it simple, challenging assumptions, speaking the same language, discussing deployment, resource deployments early, identifying priorities, continuously monitoring performance, and developing execution ability. So all those key rules that were discussed in the class about strategy planning. And then the other one is the strategy to performance loop. Get familiar with each of these 6 steps and what they mean to close that gap between setting a strategy and then measuring performance. And then the last topic that may come up on your midterm is trade-offs. We discussed trade-offs and what trade-offs are, the difference between trade-offs and opportunity cost, and then we listed 8 common trade-off reasons. So you may be presented with a case analysis of a particular situation where a business leader needs to make a decision, a trade-off decision, and it's going to be up to you to decide between one of 2 options of what the trade-off should be, and then what type of trade-off it is based on one of these 8 common reasons. So get familiar with these 8 common reasons and really just truly understand what a trade-off is and be able to articulate an example of why this particular situation needs to make that trade-off. So those are the topics that are going to be on your midterm. Again, just be ready, prepared to understand them in detail. Really what I'm looking for, though, is 3 to 4 paragraphs, 5 at most, that you understand what these topics mean, but are able to apply it to an actual case analysis. And you only have to pick 3 of the 4 that are presented to you, and that will cover your midterm. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have that I can clarify for you about the midterm. But other than that, I look forward to seeing you again on the 8th, and I hope you have a great week.